certain people will recognize the Dajjal because they actually recognize what the Prophet ﷺ had foretold about the Dajjal. But the majority, even though on his forehead it actually says kafara, but just like today, look at the trend today. The Prophet ﷺ foretold us about how women near Judgment Day were going to be dressed yet naked. And most girls actually know that. Or even how their hijabs are going to be like a camel's hunchback. But they would still put toilet paper underneath their hijabs or a flower or whatever just to make it trendy. Just like today, where girls, they would be wearing hijab, but then they would be wearing tights with their clothes. They'd be working out, they'd be walking, they'd be going to even the masjid that way. They know about the hadith, but then they'll just normalize it by saying, well, I'm still working on my deen, and without them recognizing that they're actually being part of what the Prophet ﷺ had warned them about. But then they'll just say, well, I'm just working on my deen. And without them recognizing, deen is not going to stop for you until you basically choose to embrace repentance. It's not going to stop for you. It's going to come at you. Your time is ticking, and it's either you make the choice to choose iman or you make the choice to choose kufr. And that's why the majority, the the Prophet ﷺ actually said that al-Qiyamah actually happens on shirar al-nas, the most evil people. So what's going to happen to the believers? The believers, and this is really interesting and really scary, is that the Prophet ﷺ had foretold us that the good pious people near Judgment Day, they're not going to be living in the cities. They're going to be fearful for their deen and for their children's deen and their identity, that they're going to start finding faraway caves, living in faraway caves, because the fitna is so massive in the cities. So they would choose to live far away from the city and far away from the people, because zina is going to be so prevalent, it's going to be so normalized, and all the different haram things are going to be so normalized. In fact, the best of these people is somebody that when he sees zina, he'll just say, if only you had just done it behind a rock or behind a cliff or something, rather than do it in public like that. That's the best. Now, this is really scary. In where even the Salihin, they don't even have a place to live in the city. They'll just find nowhere that is safe for their deen, but live in faraway caves. That's so scary. Alhamdulillah, right now you could live your deen, you could join a masjid, you can be active in a masjid, and you'll still fine with your deen. You could wear a niqab, mashallah, dressed in a beautiful niqab, and mashallah, she walks, and you could see, does anybody get scared of you, mashallah, with your height and with that niqab? And
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know. They do that. I don't receive anything. So
You don't receive anything? Okay, well, that's good. Alhamdulillah, mashallah, she's so tall. What, 5'11" and 3/4 or something?
almost 6 feet.
Almost 6 feet. Exactly. So almost 6 feet, and dressed, in a black abaya and a black niqab. That's that's really, it's like you would expect, like, wow, mashallah, Rabbi yahfadak ya Rabbi. But anyhow, she says she barely gets any comments. All right. Well, near the Judgment Day, even just probably being recognized for your Islam, or even trying to embrace Islam, it's going to be something that you're not going to be accepted whatsoever. Now, you want to remember that ayah is always present in my head when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually said about the people of in Surah Al-Buruj, all right? And he had said, وَمَا نَقَمُوا مِنْهُمْ إِلَّا أَن يُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَمِيدِ. The main reason why they were persecuted is really because they had believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. we still didn't even get there. We still didn't get there, but there is going to come a time where you will be persecuted because of your deed. You will not find a place. In fact, the person would pass by a grave and wish that they were inside the grave because of the amount of fitna that they're actually finding in the community that surrounds them. It's just everywhere they look, it's just people making the wrong choices. And it hurts a believer when this person's making the wrong choice and that person is making the wrong choice. You fear that what if I myself start taking this as a normalized behavior and later even adopt such a behavior as it, let me try it. And of course, remember, Prophet Adam alayhi salam, what got him into eating from the tree? It was his own curiosity. It was his curiosity, number one. And number two, he actually believed shaitan when he had actually sworn by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَاسَمَهُمَا. What does that mean? He actually said, Wallahi, I'm really serious. If you eat from this tree, you're going to live a longer life. And plus, you're going to increase your property and your resources, and you're going to be in full control of all the different things around you. And he was like, Wallahi. What did Adam alayhi salam do? Well, he reacted to it by, he was like, well, he swore by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What did he actually do? He came in an image like he was representing the deen. And this is really important to keep in mind because fitna comes more in an image where it is as if it is speaking on behalf of the deen more than in a fitna that's coming from the stands as if it was coming from a place that's not fitna. And that's what I always say. The fitna that comes from the Muslim communities, from those that actually come and attend the masjid or probably wear hijab, etc., can sometimes be a bigger fitna than the other people. Why? Because the other people, you are capable of identifying that they are kafara. But when it's a Muslim dressed in hijab, but then introducing you to probably haram things, they're coming from an angle where they're close to you. And believe it or not, I've said this many times, most of the girls that I would actually see and talk to in prisons, they were actually introduced to the wrong behaviors from Muslim communities, from the Muslim community, from their own cousins, from their own relatives, from their own friends that are Muslim. And this is so scary. This is so scary. Because when you look at the fitna, really the narratives, usually one, a very slippery slope, two, people nearby, three, how people normalize certain behaviors. The normalized behavior, that's a very dangerous fitna. So not because something is normalized, like everybody else is doing it, that doesn't make something right. That doesn't make something right because everybody is doing it. So we'd have to go back to the Quran and Sunnah and actually learn your deen to be protected from all these fitan. If you don't take the time to learn your deen, you are going to think that you're making the right judgments when your brain actually uses the society that it surrounds itself with as the place to learn from. In other words, it becomes your place and resource of information. So you got to be careful in order to make sure that you're sifting the wrong information from the right information. You have to make sure that you spend time to learn your deen, to make sure that you're getting the information from the right resources and not from the trend that surrounds you. And that's extremely important. Now, the other strange one is النار التي تسوق الناس إلى محشرهم. What is that? Is that like a volcanic eruption or what really is that? Well, we don't really know if it's a volcanic eruption or whether it's some kind of lava coming out from the earth all of a sudden, whether this type of lava or this fire, all right, this lava that's coming out is actually going to come out. So it's a massive lava coming out from near Yemen. Now, the people start running away from this lava eruption or whatever it is, and they start heading towards, so we're looking at northwards, and then they would basically go near Beit al-Maqdis. That's the nearest place that they can be safest in, not recognizing that it's actually heading towards gathering the people for Judgment Day. Oh, here's one thing that's really scary, because when we're talking about a volcanic eruption, people are running away, leaving behind all their resources, all the different things, their homes, etc. But then what they're not recognizing is that it's directing them to a certain direction. People will actually start thinking that, oh, it's just a natural thing and just a natural disaster, and not recognize that it's actually a controlled natural disaster. Now, here's one thing, is that here we go. So this fire comes out from Min al-Yemen, would basically, literally, let people flee towards a certain direction, and the place of Ard al-Mahshar wal-Manshar, the place where people would be directed to be in is going to be Palestine. They'll gather in Palestine, and they'll end up actually being there, and that's where there would be a wind. Now, here's one thing. We don't actually have the exact chronology, the exact signs of Judgment Day, which one comes first and which one comes second. But the Prophet ﷺ did mention these different 10 signs, whether we're talking about a Dukhan, whether we're talking about a Dajjal, whether we're talking about a Debba, whether we're talking about this, the sun coming out from the west, or we did talk about Isa alayhi salam. I don't know why we forgot to talk about Isa and Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Let me talk about Isa alayhi salam. Prophet Isa alayhi salam actually comes, there is al-Mahdi before him, but then is he called al-Mahdi? All the different details, that's a different story. But let's talk about Isa alayhi salam. So he comes and he embraces Islam itself. Of course, he doesn't come down as a prophet to bring in a new Sharia. What is a Sharia? Laws, okay? So he comes down, and then he first comes from the city of Damascus. Where's that? Syria. It's in Syria, all right? And then Dajjal was doing all the different fitan, spreading it all around earth. The only person that stops the Dajjal, or at least questions the Dajjal, he's got the greatest iman. He tells the Dajjal, I know who you are. The Prophet ﷺ told us about you. The Dajjal just stays quiet. You're the Dajjal. And then he decides, he's like, you believe in me or I'll kill you. He splits him in half. Splits him in half. And then he says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah. That only increased me in my iman. Dajjal will actually have a Jannah and a Nar. A Jannah and a Nar. What does that mean? So on the left, that's his Jannah. But the reality is, that's actually the hellfire. So he takes somebody and say, well, now I'm going to put you in Jannah. When in reality, he's actually put him in hellfire. And it's going to take the other person, I'm going to put you in Nar because you refuse to believe in me. And in reality, he's just putting him in Nar. Or if he puts him in Nar, he's basically putting him in Jannah. Now That's guy number one that would stand in front of the Dajjal. Guy number two is Prophet Isa alayhi salam. He comes down, he's not going to be born again. He's not going to be born again, but Prophet Isa alayhi salam would actually come down and there would basically lead the Salihin into going against the Dajjal. Now, the Dajjal will be killed by Prophet Isa alayhi salam. Prophet Isa alayhi salam will stay for a while, all right? And then everything in the world will be at peace during the time of Prophet Isa alayhi salam. Okay, now here's one thing, is that during that time, the Prophet Isa alayhi salam would actually let Islam be known and introduced to every single person in the world. In fact, Islam will enter every single home. Even animals will stop attacking each other. Massive peace internationally, worldwide. And then when Prophet Isa alayhi salam dies, that's when, listen to this. This hadith is really scary. The Prophet ﷺ said, الخلافة تكون فيكم الخلافة ما شاء الله لها أن تكون. خلافة or نبوة تكون فيكم ما شاء الله لها أن تكون. The Prophet ﷺ is drawing for us these different stages. Nubuwwah is going to stay as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to stay, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uplifts it. Then there would be a khilafah, governance, where they would govern based on the Prophet ﷺ's teachings. It will stay ruling until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to rule, and that was until 41 Hijriya. And then it would be a mulkan adudan. Some type of monarchy will stay and rule for as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to rule, and that was until 932 Hijriya. And then it would be a mulkan jabriyan, a monarchy that you will be forced in. Where? Well, just like colonization, they'll force you into this new system that would be a new type of governance, when in reality, they really are subordinated to the different colonizing countries. It's a mulkan jabriya. Here it is. King Hussein passed on, well, Talal passed it on to King Hussein. King Hussein passed it on to his son Abdullah. Abdullah, who knows who he's going to pass it on to. And then you've got same thing with the other, what's his name, Bashar al-Assad, Hafid al-Assad, and then Bashar al-Assad, and then who knows then what happens, etc. At the end of the day, they're basically controlled by the colonizing powers. Mulkan Jibri, it's forced monarchy. Who knows how long this will take? But then the Prophet ﷺ said that after that there would be a khilafa ala minhaj al-nubuwwah. There would be a khilafa on the path of nubuwwah, on the path of the prophethood. In other words, taking the same resources, taking the same references that the Prophet ﷺ had taught the people, the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. But then that's not going to last long. You know what's going to happen? The Prophet ﷺ stayed quiet after that. After he said it will stay for as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to stay for, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise it. In other words, it's going to end. And then the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in another hadith that it would be a fitna, that it would take as if there was a disease or a plague or some kind of a major disease or an epidemic that is going to be as if it was taking the lives of every single person. You just don't know who's going to be next. In other words, the fitna is going to be so massive where people will start embracing the fitan one after another without any revision. It will be so normalized that people will start leaving the deen little by little. Now, this is just to give us an idea of how the history, the chronology of some things are going to happen. Ya'juj Ma'juj will later come. Ya'juj Ma'juj, they're people. They do have very Chinese features. Are they Chinese? Are they Japanese? We don't really know. The Prophet ﷺ did say that there would have round faces, small eyes. So they've got very small eyes, and the Prophet ﷺ actually said, "Wujuhun kalmijan al-mutraqa." Their faces, they're not, you could see my face like there's the cheekbones coming up, and these would actually have their features are pretty flat features. So it doesn't mean they have flat noses. Okay, it doesn't mean that they have flat noses. She's laughing about it. All right, but their features are rather flat. Faces are rather flat, short, but they're in massive numbers. These massive numbers from 1,999 would enter Jahannam. Only one out of every 1,000 would actually go to Jannah. These massive numbers of people, they were actually existent before. In fact, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the story of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they were two tribes that were causing a lot of fitna. They were causing a lot of destruction to a certain group that was living in the eastern countries around Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, so around that area. Then Dhul Qarnayn comes in that area, and then this Dhul Qarnayn, it basically comes across these people, and they didn't really know how to talk, they didn't really know how to communicate, but they managed to deliver a message to him that this Ya'juj and Ma'juj tribes are causing massive destruction, so please find a solution to keep these people away from us. So Ya'juj Ma'juj, Dhul Qarnayn, he basically says, well, after them offering to give him money and give him all the resources, he said, I've got more than that. I don't need the resources, but you got to give me labor. What is labor? Body power. I want you guys to work for me. We're going to work together to build a wall, and actually build a wall that surrounds Ya'juj and Ma'juj. That way they will not harm you, and they will not have any control over your resources, and you will be safe. And indeed, they did build the wall. Now, here's the thing. There are some scholars that said, like Sa'di, who actually said that this wall is actually the wall of China. Other scholars, they said, well, the wall, we don't really know which wall it is. It doesn't have to be the wall of China, but who knows where they are. Do they have these descriptions that, like the Chinese, for example, are they really the Chinese? Now, one thing is that the Ya'juj and Ma'juj were also names that the Arab had actually called the Chinese. They called them Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So are they really the Chinese? Allahu A'lam. Are they another group, another tribe from the Chinese or from who knows, Taiwan or whatever country it is? The end of the day is that regardless of who these people are and what country, we just know that the Prophet ﷺ had told us their physical descriptions. They're short, got small eyes, flat faces, and black hair, and of course that they would be in massive numbers, not only causing destruction to killing and basically harming the people, but they would even harm the resources. They would even harm the resources. They would drink the water. They would harm the trees. They would leave everything totally destructed, where it is not of no use for human survival any longer. So people will start running away from these people because they will start, these Ya'juj and Ma'juj will start not only killing the people, but killing the resources. People will start running away from them. And then these massive numbers are going westwards. So now they're in the east, now they're going westwards. Remember, they're going to be in the east, going westwards. Going westwards, or what westwards? We're not talking about Europe. We're talking about Beit al-Maqdis. We're talking about that. Now they get to the lake of Tabariya. The lake of Tabariya is in Palestine. It's in the north, it's northern part of Palestine. So it's basically bordering Jordan, Syria, basically within that area. And then they would drink all the water from that lake. The last one will say, there was water here. There was water here. Well, after depriving the people from the resources and even doing massive killing where injustice is going to be everywhere, people are fleeing from these people, that's when they decide, let's actually kill God. So they hold these arrows and then they start pointing it where? To the sky. Let's point it to the sky, and what goes up must come down. It comes to them and boom, kills them all. They're all killed. Ya'juj and Ma'juj. When they're all killed, the bodies and the maggots that would be in such large numbers would actually affect the world and even affect the people. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a massive rain that washes away their dead corpse and dead bodies. And that's Ya'juj and Ma'juj and the end of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. It wasn't something that people were capable of fighting. It was basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us of something that is going to happen. A large number of people that will cause destruction, injustice to the people and even to the resources. And then eventually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically telling us this story would actually end, but it is one of the signs of Judgment Day for us to recognize of injustice and even harming everything on the planet, and how Ya'juj and Ma'juj would be one of the major signs of Judgment Day. Like I said, is it China? Wallahu a'lam. Because what we're seeing right now, even when you look at the way the Chinese would actually rip the animals and kill the animals while they're alive, is extremely, extremely disgusting, scary, and unfortunately, no mercy whatsoever. Is it Ya'juj and Ma'juj? Are they Ya'juj and Ma'juj? There are some scholars, like I said, that actually said that yes, the Chinese are Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Wallahu a'lam, they could be. But that's not a definitive answer. It doesn't mean, now in China, we actually have almost 25 million Muslims, the Uyghurs, the Xinjiang, and that doesn't mean when we're looking at that, now remember the Chinese are actually the largest growing, well, they did slow down in their population. They did slow down in their population, but it's probably a sign that one day indeed China is going to be a superpower that is probably going to indeed probably take the resources, and right now it is actually taking over the resources and probably taking over the role of the colonial Western powers. Is that the case? Allahu a'lam. Maybe, but at the end of the day, is that all of these things the Prophet ﷺ foretold us about, we can't really be definitive until we actually see a real thing where it will be a sign. Will it necessarily be called Ya'juj and Ma'juj? So the Prophet ﷺ described them as Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And by the way, even in the Bible, there is the Ya'juj and Ma'juj. They're called Gog and Magog. The Prophet ﷺ told us that every single prophet that had come before had actually warned about Ya'juj and Ma'juj. They're called the Gog and Magog. You surprised? No, it's giving like, really? All right. How about we actually stop right there with the signs of Judgment Day? Okay, with the signs of Judgment Day, and I'll open the floor for questions. Got 15 minutes, and that's it. Questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
How do like, okay, so since you said it might be, your measures are going to be coming from this, nowadays with like a lot of the C dramas, which are Chinese dramas, and K dramas, which are like Korean dramas, it's a very big thing for like Netflix and these types of shows that like the American shows. You kind of understand what like they're trying to promote, like the underlying messages, and you're a bit more aware. How would you say those types of Chinese dramas and Korean dramas? What I wouldn't say indoctrination, maybe that's a bit, but how? What are they trying to support? Like, what are they?
So generally speaking, I love that question. When we're talking about Korean or music, Korean music, or even Chinese, or let's just call it Eastern, okay? The Prophet ﷺ was always foretelling us the importance of preserving our identity. Okay. Now, Christians and Jews are definitely the nearest to our Muslim identity. The Japanese, Korean, Chinese are definitely even farther than the Jews and the Christians, because they're not actually coming from a foundation like the Jews and the Christians and Islam. At the end of the day, is that Islam even called them Ahlul Kitab. All right, Islam called them Ahlul Kitab. We have a lot more commonalities with Ahlul Kitab than actually the pagan religions, whether we're talking about Taoism, Confucianism, Buddhism, whatever it is, Hinduism, because those are pagan. Those are surrounded on whether it's culture, whether it's certain wisdoms that Confucius had given, or so-called wisdoms, all right, that he had given, or even their culture, or even Buddhism, etc. Those are a lot farther in their culture and even in the implication of their ideas or their behavior than even the West. If we are always cautioning the Muslims from adopting Western culture, even though it actually is tracing back to at least to a certain level, tracing back to the Judeo-Christian culture. How is it when we would be talking about the Japanese, Korean, or even the Chinese culture? In other words, it would even be a lot farther than even the Western culture itself. So the Muslims need to be really careful when they actually follow a certain trend or follow or adopt a certain trend, whether that is through music or whether that is through dramas or whether that is through different TV or whatever it is. They have to be really careful, because that's the tool that a lot of fitna actually goes through. The TV, what else can actually explain how the Dajjal in just 40 days can become the prime story on every single news media? Everybody's talking about it. Everybody, in just 40 days, they're actually believing him. That tells us that there is going to be some resource that everyone on planet Earth is going to be using as their reference in order to understand or probably process and adopt around the world. And one of that is probably, the TV, maybe the social media, who knows? Or maybe even something stronger, that's where social media is going to be old-fashioned. Maybe social media is going to be old-fashioned. During my time, if I were to actually talk about some of the things that were a trend during my time, you'd be like, what is that? It was a trend back during my time. During my time, it was a trend. Everybody's talking about it. Right now, no one's talking about it. Guess what? One day, the trend today, when you grow older, you're going to talk to them about some of the things that were trend, like social media, iPhones during your time. Your kids are going to look at you like, what is that? What is that? You see what I'm saying? So now that in order for us to protect our identity from the different influences, whether the influence was Yahud wa Nasara or whether the influence was pagan, Korean, Chinese, Japanese, whatever it is, whether the influence is East or West, a Muslim basically recognizes their identity in order to be distinguished, that you don't adopt not the trend that is from the East slash whether it's Indian from Bollywood or whether during my time, Bollywood was the trend. Bollywood is basically the Indian movies. The Indian movies and Indian songs and all of that, that was the trend back then. Right now it's the Korean and all those, Japanese and Korean and all those things, the animes and all of that. All right. Now that's why it's really important. If you want to preserve your identity, you have to first learn your Islam to be able to distinguish the different fitan that will be normalized during your time. So whether it's coming from the East or whether it's coming from the West, whether it's coming from pagan or whether it's coming from the Judeo-Christian, you got to be careful. The Prophet ﷺ did yet tell us that the biggest fitna that will be adopted by a lot of the Muslims is that he actually said that the Muslims will adopt that fitna. Every time they would go into, they would normalize or make a trend, they would follow it, even if they were to go into a lizard's burrow, they would just follow them in their burrows. They would just do it. It's like, oh, they're doing it. They must know what they're doing. They would basically sell their intellect to these trends. Now, here's one thing, is that the Sahaba asked, well, are we talking about the Jews and the Christians in here? And the Prophet ﷺ said, well, who else? In other words, the Judeo-Christian culture would actually be somehow superior to a certain time until Ya'juj and Ma'juj come, but the Judeo-Christian culture would actually be the most common, the superior one, where even the Muslims will want to adopt such a culture in order to fit in. So it's not going to be yet the Korean, the Judeo-Christian / Western culture is going to be probably the ruling, the more, let me say, prevalent culture that most Muslims will actually fall in that fitna. But it doesn't mean that the Eastern type of cultures are not going to be effective. So let's see this one. Is the Ya'juj and Ma'juj from Adam alayhi salam? They're from Adam alayhi salam. They're not a descendants of a different race. They're human. Are Ya'juj and Ma'juj a group of people already exist and will end up killing themselves? So I did answer that one. And will Prophet Isa alayhi salam, he will kill the Dajjal and everyone will become Muslim? Yes. Prophet Isa alayhi salam will actually kill the Dajjal. He will kill all the pigs. He will break a salib. He will break the cross, demolish the cross, and everyone will actually become Muslim at the time. Go ahead. Last question, right?
Yeah. In the Quran, it says you should come back.
Raise your voice, my dude.
In the Quran, it says you should come back to us. But then Allah's only one. Why is it saying we and us?
Good question. Why is it that the Quran, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one, why would the Quran use the word or the pronoun we instead of I in the Quran? For example, it says, Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun. We. Why is that? So in Lugha Arabiya, the word we or the pronoun we does not necessarily always refer to one, but or even plural. Sometimes the pronoun we as nahnu, as we, can be as a way of representing glorification. All right. So representing glorification and not whatsoever representing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a plural in any way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. So the pronoun we or the pronoun he in the Quran is because in Lugha Arabiya, the pronoun we or even the pronoun he is a term for glorification and not for a particular gender, okay, or a particular number. Got it? Because that's the way the Lugha Arabiya is. That to use huwa Allah. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. The word huwa, the pronoun huwa. This is in order to give glorification and not to give any way of assigning a particular male or a masculine gender. Got it? And same thing when we look at, for example, nahnu, etc. We, nazalna, arsalna, the na, which basically means we. So glorification and not in any way to refer or even give a referral to a plural. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. Did I answer that one?
Yeah.
Just a form of glorification. Last question answered, inshallah. Any more questions? No? All right. When is class going to be done? Right now. And barakallahu fikum. If there are any questions from the people online, we're going to give them we're going to allow them to unmute themselves, right? And we're going to allow them to unmute themselves and ask the question if they have a question, all right? And then we'll let you all go home, inshallah. Well, the good news is that they don't actually have a question. So we'll see you all next week, inshallah. By the way, because this is a youth class, that's why I'm not necessarily using all the hadith, because I don't want you all to get lost. I'm making the story short.